I don't think that we're going to be in a place where people want to fly a lot less. And globally, we're just going to see more and more of that as people, hopefully we continue to raise living standards around the world and more people have access to flying. Uh, so that's part of the vision too, is Minnesota being this center of a really important solution for the world.
Welcome to Sustainability in the Air, the world's first podcast dedicated to sustainable aviation. I'm your host, Shashank Nigam, the CEO of Simplifying. On this show, I speak with aviation leaders, innovators, and policymakers driving real action, separating the signal from the noise to spotlight what's truly moving the industry forward. The same focus that is at the heart of our new book, Sustainability in the Air, Volume 2. In it, Dirk Singer and I take stock of how far the industry has come and how far we still need to go. With the global carbon budget potentially running out by 2032, the clock is ticking. But the most promising solutions today aren't just environmentally sound, they are economically superior as well, from SAF and contrail mitigation to direct air capture. The book offers a practical roadmap for aviation's journey to net zero. Get your copy today. Link in the show notes. My guest today is Julia Silvis, Managing Director of Research and Intelligence at the GREATER MSP Partnership, where she works on the Minnesota SAF Hub initiative, a coalition bringing together airlines, energy companies, agricultural businesses, researchers, and policymakers to develop a sustainable aviation fuel industry in Minnesota. What makes the initiative different is its focus on building the entire value chain, from feedstocks and production to infrastructure and demand. In this conversation, Julia explains why Minnesota could become a major SAF hub, what it took to get the first locally sourced SAF into the tanks at Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport, and why policy certainty and regional collaboration will be critical to scaling the industry. This is one of those rare non-airline, non-airport interviews that you'll truly learn a lot from, like I did. Julia, it's great to be speaking with you. You've been doing some very inspiring work at Minnesota SAF Hub, which is described as a first of a kind effort. Why is this coalition-led model different from how SAF development has been approached elsewhere in the US?
Thanks for the question. We've had 3 years now to kind of think about this. We're coming up on our 3rd year anniversary in August. And I think most of the things that make us unique stem from the fact that we are working both demand and supply. So we are really trying to build and influence the entire value chain. And that makes us very market oriented. It allows us to speak with players across the value chain, it makes us cross sector. And it means that we have visibility into challenges that any producer is going to run into. So, we might not have the solution yet, but I think we're a bit ahead of saying, oh boy, sites with rail access are going to be a hot commodity, and we need to get ahead of thinking about, what are the 5 to 10 most likely sites in the state that would be suitable, that have the right rail access, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think it's a number of those things. And then the fact that we're place-based, I think you just can't get around the fact that SAF is a real world product that's made in the real world and has to be moved around. And so having a more, I don't want to say local, but having a specific geography that we're focused on, I think just helps us be more targeted and figure out, where do we really need to focus our resources to move the needle on our goals.
It's so interesting that you're trying to pull everyone together. I think I have to step back once. You are with the Minnesota Airport, MSP. Why should the airport care? Is the airline that's buying the fuel? Is the SAF producer that's supplying it? There are,
pipeline providers, truckers who will supply it.
Mhm.
Why do you care so much?
Well, the airport is a great partner. I'm actually at the economic development group for Minneapolis St. Paul region. So we
Got it.
care about jobs and good jobs for the region. And we have found, historically, when Minnesota and Minneapolis St. Paul win is when we are solving global problems, but using, local talent and know how to do that. So, we have a long history of doing that. If you go all the way back to like Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing, which is now 3M, or General Mills, some of these more legacy companies. And so we got interested in SAF because, I've heard this story several times. So I wasn't in the room when this happened, but I feel pretty confident that I can tell the story where Delta came to us shortly after many airlines and corporate travelers had made those kind of 10% by 2030 commitments in the World Economic Forum. So it was
That's
around
right. The first
2022.
movers coalition, I think, is what you're referring to.
Yes. Yeah. And they said, these are all great goals. Lots of people are committed. We're very committed. And if you do the math, there's just like not enough supply anywhere. And we have done some internal analysis and think that of our major hubs, Minneapolis, the Minneapolis St. Paul airport and the hub there has the best kind of local geography and best assets around to become a place that really produces SAF. And they said, do you want to take this on with us? The way my CEO who's in the meeting tells it, he said, no, that sounds really hard. and we don't really do that.
Mm-hmm.
But they kept at him. And then once someone puts an idea in your head, we kind of test these ideas out when we're talking with our, board members and investors and other partners. And there was enough interest there around SAF from different sectors. So not just Delta, but, Xcel Energy was interested in SAF. They're our largest utility. The large agricultural companies, Cargill was interested. Ecolab, an amazing company that does, I don't want to, it's a sustainability company that does sort of process engineering and optimization. They were interested in SAF. And so with that kind of wind behind our sails, I guess, to use a non-aviation metaphor, we kind of knew there was something there, did more analysis or spent the time to do more analysis and saw there was, these would be good jobs. This is a growing industry that's needed. And so it felt like it kind of fit in with our general understanding of how the economy worked in Minnesota. And then, we also did analysis to say, yes, we do have a lot of feedstock here. We do have the infrastructure. We do have a great airport. We do have, the research institutions and the talent, et cetera. And that was right around the time we first passed the state tax incentive. So we knew we had all the right ingredients, and that's really when we launched the hub.
Got it. How important was the state tax incentive in what you are doing?
It's, the state tax incentive was passed in 2023. So at the time, it was designed to stack on, and it still does, stack on the Inflation Reduction tax credits and was designed to work with that. I think for us, the state tax incentive was a bit of the nudge to put the ball in motion. So, we had all this enthusiasm from partners and kind of confidence that we could make SAF happen here. And the state tax incentive was, a vote of confidence from the state that, we would have a partner there in a really critical sector and that we could go out and talk about the state in a way that would be compelling to producers once we had that state tax incentive. So it's really important. It's only gotten more important since the changes to the Inflation Reduction Act and in the One Big Beautiful Bill. But it was important in 2023. It was improved last session. It's still really important.
So that's my second question, actually, a follow-on.
Yeah.
What is the change in the IRA and the introduction of the Big Beautiful Act? How does that change your vision and your goals and your targets?
Yeah, the analogy we use the most is like headwinds. Now we are doing aviation analogies, but I think we still have all the fundamentals here, right? Like we have great feedstocks. We have a lot of corn. We have a lot of wheat. We have a lot of sugar beets. We have a lot of turkey litter. We have a lot of pig manure. We have a lot of forest residues. So, and those things aren't moving around, right? Those are still here. We still have the expertise in our ethanol industry. You know, we still have really great management practices around animal manure and things like that. So all those kind of foundational pieces are not don't change with the policy landscape. I think the calculus of what it takes to get to, you know, for a startup to get to revenue certainty or like post revenue to get to kind of profitability, that the changes in the federal tax landscape have, you know, elongated that or made that harder. And one of the changes we've made is when we started, we were really thinking about commercial size producers and how do we get commercial scale production into the state, you know, of the 5 million gallon a year plus kind of level. And we are still really focused on that. And we now have a work stream that is specifically focused on, you know, smaller startups that are maybe a little more technically more immature or are still kind of working out their value proposition. And we think that's really important just because as the environment gets harder, the support we can give to those early stage startups becomes more important and helps give us, you know, hopefully we are talking to these folks, a pool of people who understand Minnesota, you know, understand our capabilities and resources and are building their business models around it and will benefit from the state tax incentive. So that's like one of the kind of more subtle shifts that we've made.
Very interesting. Yeah. In the last conference you and I were together, I heard a really good quote saying that this is the United States of America. And hence it's the states you have to look at for policy direction and not just the federal government. So I think that's definitely positive. And I hear you on supporting startups, supporting new technologies, new pathways. But I think one of the biggest partnerships you've had has been with Montana Renewables, which I believe is now the largest producer of SAF. Tell me about this partnership and how's that worked out?
Yeah, you know, Montana Renewables has just been a great partner. You know, we started working with them 2 summers ago, and this was a really collaborative effort. So we had a lot of great partners around the table here, but we realized that there had not been any SAF uplift out of the MSP airport. And we felt like even if it was just one plane or like one truckload of fuel, that we should change that and have, you know, as a kind of first anniversary marker of success, we should get some SAF and fly it out of MSP airport. And so that turned out, of course, to be like extremely complicated. We were also not just trying to get kind of any SAF, but we wanted to use SAF from winter camelina, which is a novel, you know, oil seed.
May I ask why?
Grows into... Well, so yeah, winter camelina is, so it's very small. It's like the amount of land cultivated with it is very small. But it's kind of an ideal crop for SAF. And I'll explain why in a moment, but part of using winter camelina as the fuel or the feedstock for this first flight was to show this is the vision. Like this is where we want to be going. We want to be using feedstocks that improve farmer economics because it's an extra, you know, winter camelina miraculously grows in the winter in Minnesota. It like puts down its roots, then it goes dormant, and then it's like the first thing that comes up in the spring. And so it doesn't, it's something that you can, I don't know if double crop is quite the right term. I'm not a farmer, but you can, you know, grow more on the same.
Grow multiple, multiple.
Yeah. And so it improves farmer economics. It reduces the amount of nitrates you need because fertilizer you need because it holds the soil in place over the winter when normally if there's any wind, the topsoil just goes away. Yeah. So it improves soil health, water quality, farmer economics, and it's local. Like it's sort of developed it's an ancient crop. Like the University of Minnesota didn't invent it, but they helped create the variety that's now being cultivated. So it's this real like Minnesota story that's a win-win-win for farmers, environment, and it can be made with the HEFA, the SAF from it can be made using the HEFA pathway, which is the most commercially mature, viable one right now. So that was kind of the flag we were attracted to the idea of planting that kind of flag with the first flight. And this took a lot of, collaboration, right? We needed Cargill to be on board because they were going to be supplying the winter camelina and crushing it to the oil. We needed Montana Renewables to figure out how would they accept this oil and how clean did it have to be and when was it coming and was it coming by rail or truck? We had to figure out how it would be blended once it was made into SAF and then kept separate, right? And then there was this big question about when it was going to get to Minneapolis and, how would we celebrate the fact that it was happening? And so there was literally a text thread where it was the rail car or the truck. We had to use a truck. We wanted to use a rail car. The truck left the facility and we had.
Okay, I actually want to dive a little deeper. How do you decide whether to use a truck or a rail car? Simple things around logistics, right?
Yeah, because it was such a small volume. It was easier to use a truck.
Okay.
I mean, it wouldn't be the way you would want to do it for CI, but it was.
Now,
what?
Right. One small package. How do you get this SAF from the truck? So you got this novel SAF in the truck. How do you get this SAF from the truck to the wing of the plane?
Yeah. So Montana Renewables blended it at their facility. So they did the blending there. They put it on a truck and it came to, from Montana to Minnesota. It went into the refinery, the Flint Hill, Pine Bend refinery, which is owned by Flint Hills. We had somebody actually standing outside the refinery who was just texted and said, hey, the truck went in. I just saw it. I waved to the driver. So we kind of knew it was there, but that's obviously not how you would normally do things. And then the Pine Bend refinery is able to accept fuel by truck. It's not their preferred way of doing it by any means, but then they were able to get it into the pipeline to the airport. And so the pipeline from Pine Bend goes straight to the airport, and then it's just in the fuel supply. So that's how it gets to the wing. We did have a long discussion about could we drive the truck up and put it in the wing, and apparently there's all sorts of I assume very well motivated and there for a reason regulations about fire, why you can't be driving a truck full of jet fuel around an active runway. So that was off the table. And it was this real, I think one of the things that I took away from that was we learned so much about what it will take to actually do this, right? So we realized, again, we knew a blending facility was important, but we realized again just how important it would be, because not every producer is going to have the capital to build their own blending facility or the site or, expertise, right? So it allows us to talk to a much wider range of producers when we're out there trying to recruit people to Minnesota. We realized, again, the importance of sort of rail infrastructure, truck and rail, but, really needing to know how this stuff was moving around. The fact that we do have a pipeline from the refinery to the airport was really important. So it just underscored the importance of all this infrastructure. And then the other thing was just the relationships, right? This was something that people were, really working outside their comfort zone, trying to figure out something that had never been done with companies they may have never really worked with before, right? I don't know that, or with people in the companies they hadn't worked with before.
Right.
And so there was just a lot of how can we make this happen? How can we solve this problem? And that really, the fact that we were successful after this pretty intense 3 months, I think engendered a lot of trust. So Montana Renewables, Shell, everybody at, on that side of the fuel supply things, that's a really trusted relationship. Delta really stepping in and saying, we want to make this happen and here's how we're going to talk about it. Really deepened the already deep trust we had with Delta, right? Knowing that Cargill was going to show up, knowing that Ecolab was going to pay attention to this, even though, they didn't really have a specific role to play, but they were going to pay attention and offer their expertise if it was needed on any of these kind of engineering questions. So was a lot of problem solving and goodwill, and having those relationships has really carried us with the last 2 years since that summer.
Amazing. You learn so much just getting that first drop of SAF into the wings.
Yeah.
Right. From blending to the feedstock to the transportation to the storage, the entire ecosystem comes together. And it's great learning for all the partners. Going back to Montana, what did Montana bring to the table here? And why was that different or unique?
Well, they brought expertise in refining and making the fuel from this oil. That is, again, it's an oil, but it's a novel oil seed, they were willing to take this on and say, like, we're going to figure out how to engineer that, or, refine it, engineer it, get it up to spec, so all of that was like really worthwhile. I think there's also just an attitude around solving problems and trying new things that they brought that was, everyone around the table was doing that, but that's not always the case we find with partners, especially larger companies, right? Startups kind of are in that space all the time. But when you're a really successful company like Montana Renewables, you don't need to stick your neck out, and you could just keep doing what you're doing and make money, serve your employees, your shareholders, your customers. But I think they're really committed to moving the whole industry forward, is what I've seen in conversations with them. And so they're willing to try and experiment and make big bets. And so they've been a really they were like great on all this sort of technical pieces, but they've been a really kind of fun and exciting partner to work with, right? Like, they're excited about where this could go. And so that's inspiring and energizing.
I love it. Did MSP Airport have to modify any infrastructure to get this first SAF in?
No, the airport did not. The airport, we were talking with the airport about this, and probably the hardest thing for them was like, well, where can we find a room where everyone can watch the plane we've kind of designated as the plane where the SAF is going? Of course, the SAF is just in the fuel system, so it's just a tiny little bit, but for kind of communication purposes, we said it was one particular flight. And so for them, they do this all the time, but the logistical difficulty was getting us all gate passes so we could go behind security and like watch this plane take off. And so, SAF being a drop-in fuel, that is really the experience at the MSP airport, right? It's like the changes are happening at the Pine Bend refinery. They're happening upstream of anything before it gets to the airport. And so that, that helps a lot, making it just simple, right? Like, the changes are kind of all happening upstream in a particular place. And then, we need to be figuring out how we talk about it and economics and that sort of thing. But from a logistics point of view, that simplifies it.
Right. That makes sense. Now, we've talked a lot about the supply chain and getting the SAF to the airport. One of the interesting things you've been working on is the demand consortium, comprising, I believe, Bank of America, Deloitte, Delta, Ecolab. How's that helping? How does aggregating demand from non-airline corporates actually change the economics for SAF producers?
Yeah. So that has helped us in a couple of different ways. One is storytelling, right? And sort of belief that this is possible and there's demand out there, in that it's a multi-year demand. So I think one of the ways we set up the demand consortium that was very deliberate and thoughtful was we want to have it be 5 million gallons over each year over 3 years. That is the kind of pooled resource. And so that sent a signal to producers that, I know everyone would like to have offtakes that are 10-year plus. And so that was not something we were really even thinking we would try to go for in our first bite at the apple. But, the fact that we got 3 years was this certainty, and sent a very strong signal around, this is not just Delta, right? This is Delta and folks even further, downstream of them who are wanting this SAF and are supporting it with, dollars and purchase commitments. The demand consortium, from a practical standpoint, we kind of got to a point where we had enough commitments, and then Delta was able to put out an RFP, so it was like once we had that, it was a very kind of simple contractual process. And so that helped a lot too. Just instead of sort of, hey, we're looking for some offtake, it was, here's what's happening. Here's the amount. Here's, the CI score we're looking for, da, 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 da. And that simplified the offtake and the kind of process for actually securing this.
Right. For the corporates that you approached, let's say Bank of America, were they already thinking about something like this? Was this a surprise when you came up and you're looking for, okay, who in this organization do I even need to speak with? How was that?
Yeah. Well, yes, navigating the organization is always tricky because, in a lot of these instances, we're coming in from, Bank of America is a good example. It's like our local president, and then he's great at navigating the bank, but the bank is a huge organization, right? So he has to find, who's the person who is in procurement and sustainability, who's purchasing SAF, right? He got us right to that person, but then we had to explain, here's what the SAF hub is, here's why it matters, here's how we can help you, here's, the whole kind of value proposition. And they already are thinking about SAF procurement, right? They have their own strategy. So then it was upon us to understand, well, what's your SAF strategy? How could we fit into it? So that just took a lot of, really helpful, but a lot of conversations, right? To get to a point where, it kind of made sense for everybody. And I think one thing that varied a bit between the folks who are in the demand consortium is how much the kind of economic benefits to Minnesota were important for them, right? Like Ecolab is headquartered here, and for them, it's, building our local kind of industrial base makes a little more sense, or is an argument that you might want to bring up in a conversation, maybe not first, but at some point. And that might not be as much of the case for a Deloitte, for instance, right? Who, of course, has an office here and a great presence, but is maybe a little less like we want a really strong commercial sector around our Minneapolis office.
I hear you. Right. It's very interesting because it's very seldom I can talk to someone who's got the demand side as well and the supply side and the entire economic value chain in just one goal, right? I believe the hub's ultimate ambition is 1 billion gallons of SAF per year in Minnesota. How do you get there? Do you have interim milestones, or is this 1 billion the big, hairy, audacious goal you're going to get to, and how exactly will you get there per year?
Yeah, the 1 billion is definitely a big, hairy, audacious goal. And that's like 1 billion in 2050, like some far off, like a real time, but like some decently far off time.
You've not put a number to it. You've not put a year to it.
Yeah. And the 1 billion is based on the fact that, the U.S. Department of Energy did analysis and in their billion-ton survey or study, and said Minnesota can produce 2 billion gallons of biofuel, comfortably. And so 1 billion is basically based on what we have the ability to comfortably supply. Again,
are you even suggesting that this is a conservative target? Is that what it is?
We need like 30 billion gallons in the U.S. if we're going to totally decarbonize aviation. And so at some point it will be a conservative target. But yes, right now it's a big, hairy, audacious goal. You would want, there would have to be other things that were happening to make it work. But I think the point of that is this could be a really big thing for Minnesota. We could be exporting this. We have the, again, feedstock infrastructure, people needed to supply this to other airports around the country. Whether that's obviously MSP is the most convenient, but we can get it to O'Hare, we can get it to there's lots of rail down to Houston, and we can get it out to Europe too. So that's another reason for that kind of, again, marker of the billion gallons. But we have broken it down into, for us, we talk about horizons, and we tried to keep it relatively simple. So there's just 3 of them. And the horizons help us break down the goals out to 2035 and say they're a signal to help us rally people to say, this is sort of more achievable to get to Horizon 1 or Horizon 2. And they give us milestones so we know when we reach them, we're on track and like we're having success. And so the blending facility and having commercial uplift in the state is the first horizon. When we set it out 3 years ago, it was, ongoing commercial uplift at MSP Airport. And so when the blending facility turns on, in like 2 weeks, that will be happening. So Horizon 1 will be, and it's not really completed because it's ongoing uplift, but we will have, achieved what we set out to do there. And that means the next horizon then is in-state commercial production, which we've been working on since we started, but now we're, really, really focusing on quite intensely. So that's a little bit how we think about it. These are pretty big goals, right? We wanted to reach Horizon 1 by 2027, 2028. We'd love to have commercial production by 2030, which feels really close when you think about building a
4 years
facility. Yeah. And, we would love to have multiple facilities and multiple pathways by 2035, right? So those are pretty big amounts of time in each horizon. This isn't like we're going to have 3 facilities in this county making it's not that level of detail, but it's how we believe the broad industry will evolve in Minnesota and where we're trying to go with it.
You're right. That makes sense. Now, when we last met, I believe it was in Amsterdam, we heard a lot of European airlines talking about how much SAF they're uplifting. The US airlines weren't actually talking about those figures. And we've generally seen that the impact of European mandates is that EU airlines are indeed uplifting a lot of physical SAF today, whereas US carriers are signing offtakes into the future. Now, do you foresee, if you do start meeting your targets in the Minnesota hub, do you foresee exporting SAF to Europe, or do you think you will all of this for use in Minnesota area?
Yeah. This goes back a little to what we were talking about with the changes in the US federal policy. I think one of the other changes that I didn't mention was just we're seeing more producers looking to diversify their offtakes, right? And so whether they're looking at, we're going to try to sell this co-product to this industrial facility and then, kind of sell some SAF on the side, or we're going to sell SAF, we're going to get as much as we can to Europe cost effectively, and we're going to sell the rest here. We're seeing more of that kind of diversification of offtake. And so I think that we for sure want to have SAF being uplifted here if it's produced here. But I do think we will see more diversity in that than we would have absent some of those changes in the federal tax incentives. Like, I think it would have been more like, hey, we're producing the SAF here. We're not going to worry about the European logistics. We're just going to uplift it. And now there's such a compelling business case to try to get some of it to Europe. I think that's something a lot of people are considering.
Fair enough. And I think that's a good point. Now, there are critics of regional SAF hubs who argue that fragmented state-level efforts duplicate investment across states and slow national scale-up. How do you respond to an argument like that?
Well, I think having national scale-up would be great, right? I think that I know there's enough demand for SAF that we could have multiple successful regional hubs, knocking it out of the park and producing all the SAF they say they want to in their big, hairy audacious goals, and we still probably wouldn't have enough. So I also think that it's hard to actually build things in the real world on the federal level because, again, going back to some of the examples around the first SAF we produced that 2 summers ago, that was that would have been hard to do at a federal level because it was local enough that enough of us had met each other in person, enough of us kind of had similar understanding of like the specific state policy or whatever it was that we could kind of make that work. And I think that's not impossible, but just harder to do at a federal level. And in the very practical absence of some kind of centralized implementation, I think regional hubs are the way to go. And in my conversation with regional hubs, I've noticed we all are going for this like same high level goals, right? Regional SAF production that benefits, environment, economy, helps decarbonize aviation, create good jobs, all that stuff. But everyone has a slightly different, regional mix of, Washington is doing amazing things. They have a lot of existing oil and gas infrastructure that we just, we have a great refinery, but we don't have a lot of as many refineries or as much of that infrastructure as Washington does. They have a very different tax incentive. They have different feedstocks, right? And so I think having each region kind of set it up for themselves allows there to be not duplication, but more customization and then shared learnings. I mean, I've found that, my counterparts and regional hubs are very willing to share, we tried this, it didn't work, or we looked at that. And so there's very much a spirit of generosity. It's not that we're going to try to keep it secret and you're going to have to figure it out for yourself. So, and I think in that kind of environment, maybe you would need to worry more about duplication, but that's not what I'm seeing at the moment.
So you're saying there's more benefit in sharing these lessons than trying to keep the cards close to your chest.
Yeah, I mean, generally, I do think that there's some, there's a little bit of, how are you talking to your legislators, and or can we share good messaging? Like that feels like something easy to share. Like, how are you talking to the federal government about, federal policy? And is there some place we both agree that we want to talk together? Like those are easier ways to collaborate. I think when you're looking at like who is talking to which partner, maybe that's where people get a little more territorial. Right. But even that is like pretty open, and we go to their events, they go to our events, and connect, chit chat.
You're all working together. Now, I remember your PhD. It focused on transportation technology and policy. So there's a perfect blend of all of those things you're talking about, right? But in your opinion, what's the single biggest policy gap that is currently constraining the scale up of SAF today?
I mean, I do have to say that was totally focused on surface transportation, my PhD. So I did not even contemplate aviation, but, I do know how a diesel cycle and an auto cycle work, all sorts of fun stuff. But I mean, I think there's probably two policy gaps. So one is just stability and consistency at both the federal level, the U.S. federal level, and then, I don't know, interoperability or consistency when you're looking globally at what global sort of regulations are. I think the lack of kind of confidence and stability, or like what is the posture of the United States government affects us much more than like how does CORSIA interact with the Inflation Reduction Act. So that would be the top one. And I don't even know that it's like bring back the Inflation Reduction Act credits, but it's more, we just hear all the time that I'm sure you hear this too, right? Producers want to know what the policy will be for 10 years, 15 years if they can. So I give Europe a lot of credit for that, for saying like, here's what it's going to be. And having that at the U.S. level and having it feel like, the policy isn't going to change every election. That would be a huge gift to the SAF industry, which, at the state level, we don't want to we can't, subsidize SAF at the level, or, provide incentives for SAF at the level the federal government can. And it should be an industry that eventually, quickly stands on its own two legs. But right now, as we're developing and the technology is still kind of figuring itself out, and the supply chains, like having the federal government there with a consistent level of support would be very helpful.
I hear you. It's really policy certainty that matters ultimately for long-term progress, right? Looking beyond Horizon 3 and the goal of exceeding 100 million gallons, what would it mean for Minnesota economically, environmentally, strategically to genuinely become a global hub for SAF?
Well, from an economics point of view, we've done some of this, again, sort of projections and modeling. It would be a lot of good jobs, somewhere on the order of, is it 10,000? Is it some number more of good jobs on a kind of permanent basis? That's a pretty conservative amount of SAF would be produced in that. Those jobs would be mostly upstream. And that reflects the fact that SAF would allow both farmers and, foresters, all sorts of kind of biomass producers to access new markets, which is really important right now. So, broad picture, good jobs in rural areas, more vibrant rural economies, more tools to manage our natural resources. So more tools to, take down dead wood that's standing near the boundary waters, which the U.S. Forest Service just shut today because of heat and fire. And if we had more ability to take that dead wood out and turn it into fuel, that would help make the boundary waters safer and less fire suppression, kind of stuff needed in cabin country for us. And it would mean we were really like on the leading edge of solving a problem that the world needs a solution to, right? I don't think that we're going to be in a place where people want to fly a lot less, right? We saw after COVID, people wanted to fly, and it was really like leisure travelers who were driving that, right? Like business had kind of figured out some solutions, but people want to go see their grandkids and want to go see their families and want to go to weddings. And globally, we're just going to see more and more of that as people, hopefully we continue to like raise living standards around the world and more people have access to flying. So that's part of the vision too, is Minnesota being this center of a really important solution for the world.
I love the vision, and I'm wishing you all the best. Once again, it's great to hear a holistic story rather than just an airline side of view or a supplier's point of view. So this is great that you're building and bringing all the people together and all the parties together. Now, the final part of this podcast is what I call the rapid fire round, in which we get to know you a little bit more personally. So I'll ask you simple questions, Julia, and you can reply in one word or a short phrase. So, for example, what's your favorite airline?
Oh, obviously Delta.
Good one. That's easy. Favorite airport? How about your favorite airport?
Oh, my favorite airport is MSP, the Minneapolis St. Paul International Airport, which wins awards all the time, but is an amazing airport. You don't get stuck in a tarmac somewhere where you can't walk around. There's great food options. It's pretty. There's like quiet spots you can go. Great.
Definitely seem like a local. What's your favorite book?
That's a hard one. The book I'm reading right now I'm rereading The Odyssey because of the movie.
Oh, the movie.
So I don't know that that's my favorite book, and that's like real nerd cred, but that's the one that popped to mind.
All right, Greek history.
Current reading.
Sure. How about your favorite movie?
Yep. I don't know. We just watched The Princess Bride with my Karis, and boy, that one just stands the test of time.
Okay. All right. Let's make progress on this. How about something that you do in your free time?
I run, and then in the winter, I cross-country ski as much as I can. So I'm very motivated to keep winter cold.
That's right. You told me that. What is something you'd like to learn?
Ooh, I would like to learn how to play Mahjong.
Wow. Okay, that's a good one. Okay.
Yeah.
And finally, what is the best advice you've received, Julia?
I think some combination of it's not all about you. Like most people are too wrapped up in their own heads to be worried about what you're doing. So you can kind of relax about how you're presenting yourself or that kind of thing. And done is better than perfect. So getting stuff out the door, doing things, again, going back to making SAF real in the real world, getting stuff done is really important.
Very nice. I love how we end. Done is better than perfect. And congratulations on getting the first drops of SAF at MSP. Congratulations on putting the entire
Yes.
ecosystem together, because done is better than perfect. Thank you, Julia. Really enjoyed it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Shashank.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sustainability in the Air. Aviation is one of the hardest to decarbonize industries, yet there are multiple paths to get to net zero. Awareness is key to a green future. So please give us your support to help our sustainable aviation insights reach a wider audience. You can do this by sharing this episode on your network, on LinkedIn, Twitter, or even WhatsApp. Or perhaps you might consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to this episode. You can start a conversation with us by writing to us at podcast@simplifying, that's simply with an i.com. And for more content on sustainable aviation, please visit our website green.simplifying.com and join the movement. Sustainability in the Air is an original podcast by Simplifying. The show is produced by Juraj Toth in Slovakia. Dirk Singer is our Director of Sustainability, who leads research for each interviewee out of Greenwich, UK. Shubhadeep Pal is our Supervising Editor based out of Mumbai and Singapore. The articles are written by Ayushi Badola in Dehradun in India and Meera Hull in Montreal, Quebec. Creative design is led by Ligia Esteve in Montreal. Baiba Driman is the project director for the show based out of Valencia, Spain. Special thanks to Wendy Sim in Singapore. And I'm Shashank Nigam, the CEO of Simplifying and your host. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.